30 years ago, I was not thinking about reincarnation. So what changed? In 1990, my father died, and the minister at his funeral used the word afterlife several times. His funeral was a combination of Buddhist and Christian rituals, but they did not calm his restless spirit. I wondered what the Buddhist afterlife was like as I felt Dad's ghost pace the room angrily. That was the moment I knew I had to overcome my lifelong fear of ghosts. It took 2 years of learning to meditate and taking metaphysical classes before I was able to see clearly and hear Dad's ghost. Dad was in a mahjong room, shuffling his tiles across the table, chatting with his buddies. Meanwhile, plagued by flashbacks of Dad molesting me when I was 9 years old and living in fear of his anger, and yet feeling somehow responsible for the destruction of our home, I wrote my thoughts and feelings down to help me process my despair and anger toward Dad for never saying he was sorry for what he did to me. "How could you?" I cried as my tears stained the pages of the journal. "How could you do that to me?" I said, curled up in a fetal position, sickened by the feeling of helplessness. At the same time, Dad caught the scene on the TV that hung in the corner of the mahjong room, the scene of me journaling and crying gut-wrenching tears. Do not ask me how it happened. Suddenly he knew that things were about to change. The room began to spin around him, echoing the sounds of clattering mahjong tiles, drowned out by my sobbing. When the spinning stopped, the smell of incense drew Dad to the altar at Tin Hau Temple. "Are you ready to confess?" the temple god asked, standing stern-faced to the left of the altar. A bright flash of light reflected from his halyard. "Ay-ya!" Dad exclaimed. "Are you ready to confess what you did?" the temple god said. Dad knew that all the rituals he had so carefully planned for his funeral did not save him. "I'm doomed," he said. "Now I go to hell?" The goddess Tin Hau floated to his right side. "What you did to your family, especially to your daughter," she said, then paused. The gravity of the situation sank in with her words, and he hung his head low to avoid her gaze, but he knew he could not hide from her. She continued, "You must face what you did and did not do." Scenes, somehow suspended in midair, flashed before him. The scene from the TV in the mahjong room. Next, a scene from his funeral. Suddenly he realized that I sensed his presence and felt his anger. Then the night he molested me played in slow motion, and he felt sick to his stomach. "Stop! Stop! I can't take it any more!" he cried. "Are you ready to confess?" she asked tenderly. But he could not hear her for the buzzing sound in his ears. The room began to spin, this time faster than before. He felt dizzy, sick, and ashamed, knowing the past had caught up with him, and he was destined for hell. I wrote about Dad's experience in hell in detail in Conversations with the Hungry Ghost. My first communication with him was observing him in front of the Buddha of the 10th hell, finally coming to grips with the consequences of his actions. Later, he showed me the scenes from the mahjong room and the temple. By that time, I understood that time is different on the other side or dimension. Where weeks, months, or years passed by for me, it was as if they, beings on the other side were picking up where they had left off in a conversation. I knew enough from my research to know that he had created virtual reality constructs based on his beliefs, such as they were, about Buddhism, even though his beliefs were sketchy assimilations of folktales. On the other hand, as a witness to his hell experience, I was stunned by the gentleness of the Buddha, the way the hell scene disappeared as soon as Dad forgave himself, and the compassion I felt from the monks who guided him into the monastery that suddenly appeared. I do not know all the details about what his life has been in the afterlife, but from the moment I saw him in hell, he has come to me periodically. At first he wanted me to help him make amends for what he did, and then he began to tell me his story about his life in China and what he faced coming to the Gold Mountain, the Chinese name for the United States. I began to see his flaws and to understand why he did what he did. All the while, I remembered the gentleness and compassion I felt from the Buddha of Hell. I had no idea back then how much my life would change, how my passion for life would shift from interior design to reincarnation research and past life regression therapy. It was a gradual shift, as curiosity about Dad's afterlife and his next incarnation, and my relationship with my childhood ghosts grew. I was constantly pulled back into ordinary awareness, everyday demands of raising my daughter, paying bills, working on design projects, etc. However, past life memories continued to bleed over into my current life, and ordinary events triggered past life memories. I did not know any Buddhists in Naples, Florida in 1992, and the internet was a thing of the future. But the universe and my higher self knew my path was meant to be different once I accepted my psychic gifts as a part of who I am. I wondered what Dad's next life would be, especially knowing some of the choices he had made in this life. Then I reflected on my choices in life, the missteps I had made, like old Marley's chains in Dickens' Christmas Carol. The universe must have heard my thoughts because what happened next was incredible. I was working long days. In fact, often I carried files home and worked on estimates and drafting until bedtime. The life of an interior designer is not as glamorous as some people think. I had the added challenge of double-checking my math because of my dyslexia. There's a lot of math in interior design, and I was determined to stay within my budgets to prove to myself that I could handle the numbers. Interior design also teaches you to expect the unexpected. In July 1992, I had one appointment lined up after another until a client called to cancel, giving me a block of open time. Suddenly, I felt an urge to go to the library, which was located in between the two clients. I felt silly, but as I entered the library, my hand pulled in the direction of the metaphysical section. I had learned to use psychometry, reading energy with my hands, to guide me or to give me messages about an object. This time, my left hand quickly scanned the shelves like a Geiger counter until I held 6 books. I checked the books out and headed to my appointment. The same thing happened in the afternoon. Another client had to reschedule her appointment. It was late in the day, so I decided to head home. As I drove by the Aquarian bookstore, I felt an urge to stop there. Again, I used the psychometry technique with my left hand to peruse the shelves. I already had 6 books that I did not know when I would find the time to read, but my hand guided me to the baskets on the floor that held free magazines, especially the one that was a regional publication. When I got home that night, I realized I did not have estimates to work on for a change, so I curled up in my favorite chair with the books and magazine. I noticed the full-page ad in the magazine for a workshop with Brian Weiss, M.D., author of Many Lives, Many Masters, at a Unity church in Sarasota. Realizing that was one of the books I found during my trip to the library, I knew there was no coincidence. So I opened the book and I did not put it down until 4 o'clock in the morning. Normally, I'm not a fast reader, but Weiss's story about his discovery of past lives and how he went from an agnostic psychiatrist to a leading past life regression therapist felt like an answer to many prayers. Instead of being exhausted, I felt energized. I knew my life would never be the same. The next day, I called my ex-husband John and asked him if he would go to the workshop in Sarasota with me. I was sure our relationship was karmic. John agreed, and we arrived so early that we were able to sit on the second row of the seats on the stage. Sitting so close to Weiss, hearing his soothing voice, and feeling the peaceful energy that exuded from him had a calming effect. Every word he said felt like truth. The audience that filled the auditorium listened to him in hushed silence. Then Weiss guided us through a regression. From my meditation practice, I knew the relaxation induction well. I quickly slipped into an altered state of consciousness. I heard Weiss say, "Now go back to your childhood and remember a happy time." I panicked that yet another traumatic childhood memory would come up like the flashbacks I had been having after Dad died. But as I focused on my breath, I saw a light blue shirt in front of me. I recognized the tiny pleats and soft embroidery of my Uncle Don's favorite shirt. He held his outstretched hands together tightly, as were mine and my sisters and brothers. I heard him say, "Button, button, who's got the button?" As he pressed his hands over ours, I could not help but smile when I remembered this childhood game. At last, a happy memory. I did not hear the rest of Weiss's induction, but found myself floating in a dark cave. I could see clearly, and I knew it was not an ordinary cave. When I looked around, I saw an opening to the right where 2 young braves on Appaloosa horses galloped toward the distant mountain range. I was surprised that the scene appeared as if it were daylight, even though the cave felt subterranean. But before I could think too much about that, I saw a figure in my peripheral vision. As he moved closer, I realized he was not an ordinary person. Although his shape was like a human body, I saw that he was a light body rather than flesh and bone. He floated toward me, and my heart began to quicken. I heard his thoughts as he raised his right hand into a mudra that looked like the hand signal for "I love you." It did not comfort me when he said, "Kyotoyama." I understood it meant, "Follow me." Fear gripped me like a vice, and I suddenly snapped out of the journey as Weiss guided the audience through the rest of the regression. After coming so far and feeling so eager, the experience rattled and disappointed me. However, as you will see in Chapter 11, Being Present, this part of the journey was to be continued. The next Weiss workshop was in Naples a year later, when he did the group regression and got to the place where he said, Remember a happy time in your childhood. My Uncle Don showed up again, and I felt safe. This time I heard the instructions to go in utero. I knew it was about 4 to 5 months, but I witnessed the scene outside the fetus's body. I became aware of my mother's anger tinged with fear, and Dad's loud voice cursing in his Toisanese dialect. I froze in fear. In fact, from that moment I did not hear any other instructions until it was time to return from the journey back to ordinary awareness, which I did on cue. I could barely move. I was fortunate that energy workers sat next to me. They helped me come back fully into my body so that I could stand and then walk. I headed to the restroom to put my hands under the water, a technique I had learned to calm myself. For the next 2 weeks I practiced self-hypnosis, determined to complete the journey that started at the workshop. A memory came up about a Chinese girl with bound feet whose poor family sold her during the time of famine to a wealthy family. I saw the patriarch and matriarch of the wealthy family as my current father and mother. As much as I had argued inwardly with Weiss's statement that we choose our parents, this past life regression and a spontaneous life between life experience showed me the moment I did just that, and why. Mind you, these things were happening at the same time I was working 60 hours a week, recovering from Dad's death, a divorce, and filling my empty nest as my daughter began her first year at college. My point is that my soul knew I was ready to heal the trauma from my childhood through regression therapy, and that I was ready to also expand my conscious awareness. My soul, my spirit guides, and angels not only nudged me along my path, but also supported my process, as you will see in the following chapters. Even though I openly share my process, I believe it is important to note that yours will be quite different. As strange as my life may seem, looking back over the 30 years, I now better understand the divine order in everything that happened, including the setbacks and detours, the moments when I dug in my heels, and the moment when I finally surrendered. Most of all, I see how everything in my life, including before I discovered reincarnation, was a step on my path. Remembering so many past lives has paradoxically given me a broader perspective about the part each life played in the bigger picture, and how significant the opportunity to be living this life is to my evolution. My process has been to remember first and then discover material about the memory. My experiences not only validated what I read about reincarnation, they showed me aspects I have not found anywhere. I eventually trained with Brian Weiss in 2012 and 2015, with Carol Bowman in 2016, and with HCH Institute in 2020 and 21. I have synergized what I have learned about meditation, energy work, mediumship, and regression therapy into my practice for my personal journey as well as for my clients. Regression therapy helped me change my perception of the past and prepare for the future. I used my psychic gifts to help me research my ancestors' sojourns to America and discovered an interconnection with my reincarnation research. In other words, everything in my life was nudging me toward a deeper understanding of reincarnation. Even though the memories of my past lives have come in fits and starts, at last I have collected enough snippets to make sense of them, to see the red thread of fate that connects each life to this one. I have approached my experiences, which some would call paranormal, with the scientific method, and have kept my findings close to my chest like a poker player until I had enough evidence to feel confident to share my results. However, where my methodology has worked for me repeatedly, I cannot guarantee that others can replicate it. I fully understand why this is so, for I believe that we are all unique beings who must find our own way. I hope my story will inspire you to trust your process and that it shines a light to help you discover your truth. Furthermore, I believe what I have experienced is not paranormal, but rather it is an essential part of one's spiritual evolutionary path. It is not for the faint of heart. I believe it is the ultimate hero's quest. In Chapter 11, Beyond Past Lives, I will address that question I hear so often. How do my past lives affect this life? As a mystic, I was not content to glean the past life data, resolve, or heal past karma. Something pushed me to go deeper still. I've created a glossary and a list of suggested reading or viewing of books and movies or documentaries. The reincarnation process. For simplicity, I define the physical and non-physical worlds as two parts of the reincarnation process for planet Earth. You may be familiar with other names for the non-physical world, such as the spirit world, astral world, bardo, life between life, the afterlife. Even though we focus on the non-physical world, I believe it is beneficial to understand the non-physical world. From my conversations with ghosts and spirits, and journeys to the non-physical world between incarnations, I have gathered information about it that has helped me in the physical world. My first experience was with my father's spirit. I was not surprised when I found him playing mahjong with his buddies. In fact, at his funeral, I predicted Dad would play an endless game of mahjong in his afterlife. However, I was not prepared for how the universe got his attention during the game. The sequence of Dad's experiences at the mahjong room, the Tin Hao Temple, the 10th hell, and then the monastery showed me how spirits create virtual reality constructs, like levels in a video game. It is common to create a virtual reality construct that is familiar, that fits one's beliefs. For instance, Josie sought comfort in her bubby's kitchen, but soon found herself in an auditorium with other addicts, not to be judged, but to be healed by energy workers and sound therapy. Marco Antonio replayed his courtroom scene before the Inquisition over and over in a continuous loop like a record player needles stuck in a groove until my memory of him propelled him to the scene where his deceased body was disinterred, hung on a stake with his books piled up around his feet and set ablaze as smoke rose and filled the air with a dark cloud and embers. He replayed that scene until we could unlock the seed of his anger toward the institution of the church. At times, when I still experienced anxiety about church rituals, I sensed Marco Antonio has not completely healed yet or forgiven those who mistreated him. Just as the environment is virtual, so is time, which can be drawn out or changed instantly with one's thoughts. Events that appear to happen over many months or years for me were happening instantaneously in the non-physical world, where time and space were more fluid than in the physical world. Not only time and space, but also one's appearance and state of health can change arbitrarily. Even though Dad's health had deteriorated due to the side effects of lung cancer that he refused treatment for, when he appeared to me, he looked the way I remembered him in 1957. Such was the case for many spirits I have communicated with. But my mother, who had a severe stroke prior to her death, took more earth time to appear to me, although she was able to convey her thoughts immediately after her death. Certain that Josie would arrive in the non-physical world in quite a state after her opium-induced automobile accident that sent her into a watery grave, I was surprised to see her sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, decked out as if for a night on the town. If you have ever played a video game where you create your avatar and setting and overcome obstacles to rise to higher levels, you have had a taste of the non-physical world. Just as each level in the video game is governed by a set of parameters, the non-physical world has its set of principles. Many cultures organize the non-physical world into heavens or hells or higher or lower dimensions. I am familiar with the Bardo, the Buddhist name for the state of existence between death and rebirth. But when I found my father in the 10th hell, I had no idea that there were many hells. So I asked, how many hells do Buddhists have? The answer varied depending on who I asked, but one thing seemed clear. People who have committed certain deeds go to a hellish place designed for them. My focus is not about defining the many beliefs about heaven or hell, but to share what I have experienced both as a medium and as a past life regression therapist, as well as through my personal journeys. My sense is that the concepts of heaven and hell were based on mystical experiences that were told in the language of the culture. However, I sense the information was incomplete, even as I am sure that what I have experienced is incomplete. I have tried to be open-minded, but I feel these topics need much more investigation. In past life regression therapy, Michael Newton, PhD, and others have investigated what Newton calls the life between lives realm. He systematically breaks down the process into several categories as follows: welcoming spirits interaction, station stops for the incoming soul, orientation with one's guides, reconnecting with one's soul group, and recognizing soul colors, just to name a few. Then Newton says a soul meets with an inner circle and a council of elders for therapeutic opportunities, life review, and selection of the life and body for the next incarnation. Other regression therapists such as Dolores Cannon and Joanne DiMaggio share similar accounts. My personal experience has confirmed some of these categories but not others, and even the ones that have been confirmed happen in a more organic way for me than what Newton described. I have experienced spontaneous jumps into the life between lives, or LBL. For me, each experience was unique, as you will see in the stories I have shared. I believe that one's soul will give the individual exactly what he or she needs and is able to process. Therefore, I pay attention to what people glean from their process to help them with their current life. For instance, I felt an indescribable peace and empowerment when I discovered the reason why I chose my parents and the abusive circumstances, knowing that I chose them. And when I witnessed the healing work that happened for Josie, who had been addicted to alcohol, drugs, and sex, I wondered if energy and sound healing therapies could help addictions in the physical world. Not long after my LBL experience, I was thrilled when I saw an article about sound therapy for veterans suffering from PTSD. The most profound experience I have witnessed in the non-physical world is knowing that what we call death is not the end. Instead, it is a transition. The experience I had of healing the relationship with my father from his place in the non-physical world affected him as well as me, and I believe the healing energy went even further to many generations of our ancestral lineage as well as to our descendants. I also believe that healing specific issues sends healing energy out to all beings who share that issue, and that is why I attract clients and spirits who have similar healing needs as I once had. When I look at death now, I think of it as a rite of passage, a graduation of sorts, knowing that I have completed my mission in this incarnation. I take the same position as the Dalai Lama, to live consciously, to die consciously, and to be reborn consciously. I'm not a Lama, a spiritual leader in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but I believe I have much to do and shall continue what I have started, albeit in my next life. Even though I am not a Lama, in those wonderful mystical moments when I have had glimpses of the evolution of mankind, I am filled with hope instead of fear. I believe we have chosen the earth experience to embody love, divine love, in everything we think, say, and do. I believe that part of our earth experience is to be co-creators, manifesting divine love in our personal lives, our family lives, in our professional lives, and for the world at large. But first, we must remember who we really are. The earth experience has been compared to school, and I am comfortable with that analogy. I would, however, add that I believe it is a directed individual study. In other words, your earth experience was designed for you by your soul, just as you go through stages of progress from preschool to elementary, from elementary to middle and high school. You learn things along the way, hopefully building a body of knowledge and learning to think critically. If you are lucky, you go on to college and to upper graduate levels. One thing I like about this analogy is that it helps me be compassionate towards someone who is a newbie on his or her earth experience, as opposed to someone who has had many lives and who has evolved during his or her sojourns to earth. It also helps me be compassionate with myself when I realize how much I do not yet know. Some people refer to the newbies as young souls and the more experienced travelers as old souls. I'm not entirely comfortable with the use of soul in this context because for me the word soul designates my connection with the source, the all that is, Tao. I have wrestled with that concept because I believe Source is infinite. Therefore, it feels illogical that it would be young or old. I posed this idea to my higher self and discerned that soul breathes the breath of life into my physical body, and a stream of consciousness flows into my body and animates all systems. At the same time, a portion of my consciousness dwells in the non-physical world in a series of virtual reality constructs, while another portion is always connected to the source. My physical body is like the yang aspect, and my non-physical body is like the yin aspect of Tao. I believe my soul orchestrates the energies of both realms and at the same time is part of Source. Therefore, I distinguish that part of my soul which embarks on each incarnation of the earth experience as an individuated sojourner. I borrowed the word sojourner from my genealogy research. My Chinese ancestors did not consider themselves as immigrants to the United States, but as sojourners who came to America, the beautiful country, the Gold Mountain, for many reasons, only to return home like prodigal sons. I will admit, until 2002, a part of me felt out of place on Earth, as if I were on the wrong planet. In fact, as a child, people often said to me, "Earth to Carol," when I appeared to be lost in my thoughts. Then I had a regression session in 2002 that took me home, and I realized I am a tourist, a sojourner on Earth. I realized then that I had a purpose on this Earth mission, although it took me many years to understand my purpose in this life on this planet. How does karma fit into the cosmology of reincarnation? Karma is the law of cause and effect. In the Earth School analogy, whether we advance a grade or repeat a course depends on the karma we create in each incarnation. Positive karma causes positive results, and negative karma causes negative results. What you sow, so shall you reap. I believe instead of judgment, punishment, or retribution, we are destined to balance our karma. The onus is on us to rebalance our karma, as you will see in the stories ahead. I also believe that when we align with our soul, we create a state of grace that can override a karmic debt. As we heal our karmic wounds and help others discover their ability to heal, we create an energy of grace where magic happens. Therefore, I have devoted the last 30 years of my life to clearing negative karma and tapping into the positive karmic energies that I have also accumulated. I made this choice consciously to fulfill part of my life purpose. Now, I love the Earth experience so much that I look forward to my next incarnation and to witnessing the evolution of mankind. I have seen glimpses of my next life, which guides me to sow the right seeds and inspires me to keep learning new things, even in my golden years. Maybe this is what the Buddha meant by the 8 Noble Truths: right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, or meditative absorption or union. Many people ask, why don't we remember our past lives? This is a great question, and there are many theories. Ian Stevenson, MD, documented over 2,500 cases of young children who remembered their past lives. Those cases were in countries where reincarnation is an accepted belief. Carol Bowman, MS, dealt with a case much closer to home when her son's fears became the catalyst for her research and books about children's past life memories and family reunions. Looking back, I can see where I was remembering my past lives at an early age. However, I did not have the support that Chase Bowman had, and yet eventually the memories from my childhood caught up with me. My sense is that we remember when the time is right. I believe our soul knows when we are ready to remember, and that it is part of our evolutionary process. Just as a song can trigger or precipitate a happy memory, and yet another sound can trigger or an unpleasant memory of the past of this life, there are similar triggers about past life memories. For instance, the song Entre les Étoiles was a happy memory for me of Alliance Francaise Club in high school, but it also connected me to a prior life as a young Jewish girl living in France. Sometimes raised voices stir up the memory of the harsh sound of my parents shouting at each other, and at the same time trigger other lifetimes when people verbally abused others. I discovered that those other lifetimes held an emotional charge that caused me to overreact to my parents' arguments and to shrink in fear. I believe our souls nudge us towards the memories to see if we are paying attention, and have witnessed what happens when we choose to ignore the nudges. Boom, the cosmic 2x4. I have been guilty of sweeping an issue under the rug until I trip over the rug and fall flat on my face. But that was where I was then, where we all are until we begin remembering. There are many types of triggers besides sounds. Smells, textures, and objects can trigger the memory of the past of this life or of a past life. Deja vu may be a past life memory. Even a certain time of the year can cause seasonal memories relating to the same time of the year an event took place in the past. A strong positive or negative reaction when you meet someone can be a tell that gives clues to a past life memory of a former lover or an enemy. Every moment before the present moment is my past life. So if I sense any of these reactions happening, I check in to discern whether the reaction goes back to the past of this lifetime or to a previous lifetime or both, because I know it is another opportunity to heal and grow spiritually. I have learned to be aware of triggers I experience, and even those I witness others experience. My goal is to get to the cause of the effect within me or the other as quickly as possible to dissipate the energetic charge. I observed that the sooner I can shift the energy, the easier it is to resolve. My approach is a pragmatic one, and to be proactive before the energy becomes overpowering. One of the challenging aspects about triggers is when a person cannot recognize that he or she is reacting from a past memory that bleeds over to the present. The bleed over is like a double exposed photograph that makes sense initially until you look more closely at the image. And since an issue can be repeated in more than one life, a past life bleed over can be multiples, which is tricky to discern. But even multiple bleed overs become more apparent with practice. For instance, even if you do not believe in reincarnation, you may have witnessed a woman who has been in an abusive family situation choose a partner who is also abusive. Even when she finds the courage to get out of that relationship, she might still react out of fear when a person raises his or her voice in an authoritative way. The overpowering tone of voice triggers the memory of her abusive family and of her partner until she can become desensitized to the sound. I will go into more detail about triggers and bleed over, about what happens between incarnations, and how regression therapy can help heal the imprint or energy of a person's wounds carried over from the past into the present in the following chapters. Now let us begin exploring 8 past lives, starting with Lily. Lily's chapter will be the longest one because I have more memories of her story than I do the others. Keep in mind that I not only remember my past lives, but I also see their lives from a medium's point of view, which gives me insight beyond past life memories. Each experience was unique and yet revealed connections from one lifetime to another, more facets of my soul. The stories may seem like fiction, but where do fictional stories come from after all? You may notice a few glitches, but life is full of glitches. I pay attention to them more now than I did before. They steer me toward truth. In my case, truth is stranger than fiction.